When the CO's paralyzed daughter was hidden for 10 years, a single dad discovered amazing love. Jim Thompson had always been the kind of man who wore his heart on his sleeve, but today, he felt like the world was on his shoulders. As a single father in the small town of Maplewood, every moment was a struggle, but every laugh from his son, Charlie, was worth it. The sun poured through the cracked windows of the auto repair shop where he worked, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Those motes, drifting lazily, reminded him of his dreams held tight beneath the weight of responsibility. He glanced at Charlie, sprawled in the corner with a crayon in hand, doodling away happily. That boy truly was the light of his life, yet behind Jim's warm smile, anxiety brewed. The whispers about him about being just a mechanic, a single dad without prospects were insistent, almost deafening. He pressed forward, working hard to provide for Charlie, imparting lessons on integrity and perseverance. Now and then, he caught glances from the townspeople that bore judgment like the sun on his back, a constant reminder of how they saw him, a husk of a man destined for middle-class struggle. Meanwhile, in a sprawling estate just outside town, Rebecca Harper lived a life cloaked in shadows. The powerful CEO of a tech company, she had once been the talk of the town, a glamorous figure with a bright future. But 10 years ago, tragedy struck when her daughter, Lily, was paralyzed in an accident. Fearing judgment and the cruel scrutiny of a world that valued appearances over reality, Rebecca isolated them both in that grand house, avoiding the community she could no longer bear. As the annual community fundraiser approached, fate twisted and turned, bringing Jim and Rebecca face to face for the first time. Amid the laughter and mingling of townsfolk, their bond ignited, two parents navigating the stormy seas of love, loss, and the relentless pursuit of happiness. Jim couldn't help but feel a spark when Rebecca spoke of her daughter. Her eyes, though shadowed with sorrow, lit up with fierce affection. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As days went by, Jim began visiting Rebecca's home, where he introduced Charlie to Lily. At first glance, Lily's condition seemed like a heavy blanket between the two boys, but the magic of childhood prevailed. Laughter filled the air during backyard playdates, as Charlie and Lily created their own games, indifferent to the complexities of life. Jim, standing back, watched in awe, his heart swelling. This was joy he hadn't known he was missing. But lurking beneath the surface were the ever-watchful eyes of Maplewood. Whispers began, spreading like wildfire. The mechanic and the CEO, a union that made some raise eyebrows and others sharpen their tongues. Jim felt the pull of his world, a community that demanded conformity, even as he yearned to break free and wrap his arms around this unexpected love. The tension rose, an elastic band stretched taut, as Jim found himself at a crossroads, protecting Charlie's innocence versus pursuing the imperfections of love that spring in the most unlikely places. Would his heart find the courage to bridge the gap of social class and depth of connection? The stakes were high, and as the first hints of adversity threatened their budding relationship, one question weighed on his mind. Would he risk everything for the hope of something greater, or would he let fear dictate the life path set before them all? The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm glow over Maplewood. Jim parked his truck outside the cafe where he and Rebecca had agreed to meet. His heart raced. Would this meeting deepen their connection or unravel the fragile thread of understanding they had woven together? As he walked inside, the aroma of coffee mixed with fresh pastries filled the air. His eyes searched for Rebecca, and when he spotted her at a corner table, his breath caught. She looked beautiful yet weary. Her hair fell in soft waves around her face, and though there was a tightness around her mouth, her smile met him halfway as he approached. "Jim," she said, standing to greet him. There was an undeniable warmth in her tone. "Hey, Rebecca," he replied, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. They settled into their seats, the noise of the cafe dancing around them, But their conversation quickly drifted into a world of their own. Charlie and Lily are becoming best friends, Rebecca said, her eyes sparkling. It's like they have their own secret language. Jim chuckled, relieved to see her spirit sparked. They've got that out playing adult stuff down. Your backyard is a wonderland for kids. But as the small talk faded, Jim sensed the unease beneath Rebecca's laughter. It was as if they were both balancing on a wire stretched taut over a chasm of unasked questions and unspoken fears. Jim, she hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. What are we doing here? I mean, where is this all heading? His heart raced. Had she seen too deeply into his thoughts? I'm not sure, he admitted, feeling the weight of his own uncertainty. But I do know I want to be a part of your life, of Lily's life. If you'll let me. Rebecca's gaze dropped for a moment. The world is watching us, she said softly. I'm terrified of what they might say. His stomach twisted. I've faced the whispers, he said, hoping to ease her fears. I may be a mechanic, but I know a good heart when I see one. Together, we can drown out their noise. It's about us, not them. In that moment, Rebecca looked up, her eyes searching his. Maybe you're right, she murmured, almost to herself. But how do we move forward? Bringing our lives together isn't a simple task. Nothing worth having is, Jim replied with a smile. But I believe we can do this. For our kids and for us. Just then, a sharp laugh erupted from a table across the room. Jim's head turned instinctively. Several townsfolk, recognizable faces, were pointedly looking their way. He felt the heat rise to his cheeks as the laughter turned to snickers. See? He said softly, leaning closer to Rebecca. They're judging us, but they don't know our story. They don't see how love breaks boundaries. Are you sure this is worth it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want fear to decide my life anymore, Jim confessed, the urgency in his voice capturing the truth they both felt in their hearts. But as they stared at each other, the laughter from the table rang clear, dismantling their shared moment. A woman pointed at them, and Jim's heart sank. Suddenly, the cafe felt smaller, too close. Jim, what if they never accept us? She asked, the tremor in her voice betraying her strength. That might be a price we'll need to pay, he said, resolute. But love is worth the risk, isn't it? Just then, a calm determination washed over Rebecca's face. Hope flickered in her eyes, and in that fleeting moment, he saw a possibility for a future together. Then, almost instinctively, he reached for her hand. Let us make a vow to each other. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. They held each other's gaze, the world around them fading into a blur. But as hope settled between them, the doors swung open, and in walked someone from Jim's past, a face he hadn't seen in years, yet whose presence was charged with unexpected consequences. Jim? The figure called out, and the air thickened with uncertainty. What storm would this uninvited presence unleash on their fragile bond? Jim felt the ground shift beneath them, fear creeping back in. Would this confrontation threaten everything they had just begun to build? Jim's heart raced as he turned toward the voice. There, framed in the entrance of the cafe, stood a tall figure he recognized instantly. It was Mark, his old boss from years back. They hadn't parted on the best terms, and the memories came flooding back: late nights, stress, and the disappointment of being passed over for promotions. But that wasn't the worst part. Jim felt Rebecca's grip on his hand tighten, her eyes wide. The laughter from the other patrons felt like a distant echo, replaced by a heavy silence that descended upon their table like a dark cloud. Jim, Mark said again, now making his way toward them, a mix of surprise and something colder in his expression. I didn't expect to see you here. Yeah, Jim replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Just grabbing coffee. Rebecca shifted in her seat, unsure whether to smile or retreat. Jim could feel the tension radiating off her. It was almost palpable. Nice to see the town hasn't changed much, Mark said, looking past Jim to Rebecca. His gaze lingered a second too long, and Jim could feel the defensiveness building within him. And you are? Mark asked, arching an eyebrow, clearly sizing her up. "This is Rebecca," Jim introduced, his tone laced with a quiet protectiveness. "She's important to me." He felt his chest tighten, unsure how to navigate the unmistakable judgment written across Mark's face. Mark smirked, a knowing look flickering in his eye. "I see. Well, that's sweet, Jim." He let the words hang in the air, heavy with sarcasm. For a fleeting moment, Jim wanted to stand up and confront Mark, to remind him of his worth, of the change he had brought to his life. Instead, he sat there, veins prickling with an uneasy blend of anger and protectiveness. "Nice cafe, though," Mark continued, oblivious to the charged atmosphere. "Feels like old times." Rebecca looked up at Jim, her expression torn. "Should we go?" she whispered, a hint of worry in her voice. "No," Jim said firmly, squeezing her hand gently. "We will stand our ground." Mark sensed the tension shift, perhaps even the hint of defiance in their resolve. "Hey, I'm just here for a coffee. No need to get tense." Jim's jaw tightened. The choice of words was calculated. He could feel the eyes of the whole cafe on them, just waiting for the inevitable spectacle to unfold. "Just because I'm not working for you anymore, doesn't mean I need your permission for how I live my life, Mark." "Your life? Sure, but the last I heard you were settling for less," Mark responded, the laughter of the others starting to filter back into the scene like a distant drone. Rebecca's voice was soft but trembling. She was feeling the same pit of dread and unworthiness that the scornful remarks had stirred up. But just when Jim thought they were drowning in uncertainty, he felt a rush of warmth sweep through him, reminding him of the vow he had made. He turned to Rebecca, his voice filled with conviction. "We may not fit into the boxes they've created for us, but that doesn't dilute what we share." Mark rolled his eyes, but Rebecca looked at Jim, a flicker of pride lighting up her features. "Let us go," Jim said suddenly, standing up from the table, refusing to let Mark's presence dim their newfound hope. As he moved toward the door, he felt Rebecca's hand slip into his. They walked out together, the cool evening air embracing them. But as they stepped outside, Jim couldn't shake the feeling that Mark would not easily let go. Would this confrontation with his past tarnish their future? And just what was the full weight of the secrets Mark held in store for him? The door swung shut behind them, muffling the noise from the cafe. The fresh evening air felt like a balm against the unsettling weight they had just left behind. Jim inhaled deeply, trying to steady the quickening beat of his heart. He could still picture Mark's condescending smile, the way he had examined Rebecca like she was a part of the furniture. Jim's fingers tightened around hers, his resolve flaring hot and fierce. Rebecca turned to him, her expression softening. "You handled that well," she said, searching his eyes for reassurance. Jim could see the lingering worry there and felt a rush of protectiveness wash over him all over again. "Yeah, I just wish I could have said more," he confessed, feeling the grip of insecurity still nibbling at the edges of his confidence. "I don't want him to be a shadow looming over us." "Jim," she said gently, stepping a little closer, "you've come such a long way." The sincerity in her voice sent warmth flooding through him, cutting through the lingering doubts. "Don't let someone from your past define you now." He nodded, his chest swelling with a mixture of gratitude and emotion. She was right. This relationship was built on trust and honesty, a far cry from the strained workplace dynamics he had endured. As they strolled down the street, illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights, conversation flowed more naturally. They shared small stories about their days, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Each moment was a reminder of their connection, unraveling the tension that Mark had briefly wrapped around them like a coil. But the lighter mood didn't last. Jim felt the shadows creeping back in. "I'm just worried that Mark won't just let this go." He persistent. Rebecca stopped walking and faced him squarely. "Then let us deal with it together. You're not alone in this." Her eyes were fierce, and the strength in her voice was contagious. He felt a flicker of hope maybe they could withstand anything. As they rounded the corner, Jim spotted a small park where a few kids were playing, their parents nearby. It was a scene painted with warmth, laughter drifting in the air, and a part of him longed to join in. It felt so far from the workplace politics that had once consumed him. "Why don't we sit?" Jim suggested, motioning toward a bench under a flowering tree. They settled down, the cool with a familiar comfort. The park was peaceful, the distant laughter igniting a sense of normality that Jim desperately craved. "Tell me, do you think I should just confront Mark?" he asked, looking at her, trying to gauge her thoughts. "I think it could help," she replied, her brow furrowed slightly. "But it has to be on your terms. Don't let him push you around." Jim took a deep breath, contemplating her words. "What if he brings up things I'd rather forget? Things I've worked hard to move past?" Rebecca took his hand, squeezing softly. "Then own it. You've fought hard to be where you are now. That's your strength. His words can't take that away." The weight of her support mingled with an exhilaration he hadn't felt in years. Could he really face Mark again, armed with the resolve and love Rebecca offered? Just then, he noticed a figure lingering at the entrance of the park. Familiar. Whispers of unease tickled the back of his mind. As the figure stepped closer, Jim's heart sank. It was Mark. And he wasn't alone. "Looks like the past has a way of tracking you down," Jim muttered, dread curling in his stomach. Rebecca's grip tightened around his hand as the tension between them weighted down the atmosphere, signaling the storm that was about to unfold. Jim's breath caught in his throat. This was not just a casual encounter, it felt like a reckoning was moments away. Would he stand strong against the resurgence of the pain he thought he'd left behind? What was Mark's agenda this time? Jim felt time slow as Mark drew nearer, flanked by two men who radiated an air of intimidation. Each step Mark took felt like a slap against Jim's resolve, and he could see the familiar smirk stretching across the man's face like a predatory grin. "Jim!" "Rebecca," Mark called out, his voice dripping with a feigned warmth that sent a shiver down Jim's spine. "What a surprise to see you here, enjoying a lovely evening. I didn't realize you had a thing for parks." Jim exchanged a quick glance with Rebecca, who tilted her chin slightly as though silently telling him to remain steady. This was their moment to hold their ground. "What do you want, Mark?" Jim asked, trying to inject strength into his words. Mark's smile widened, revealing a confidence that was chilling. "Oh, come on. Can't a guy just say hello? Besides, I couldn't help but notice how cozy you two look." He paused, letting his gaze linger on Rebecca, which only made Jim's jaw clench tighter. "Looks like you've been keeping a little secret. What are you talking about?" Rebecca shot back, her voice sharper than Jim had ever heard it before. She was stepping up, and it fueled Jim's confidence. "The whispers at the office have been quite entertaining." Jim's rise. "You're a special relationship." Mark leaned back on his heels, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "It's almost like you two are trying to escape something or someone." Jim felt a heat rising in his chest, a blend of anger and protectiveness. "You don't have a clue about our lives, Mark. Just back off." "Oh, but I think I do," Mark replied, his voice lowering conspiratorially. "You see, I have my ways. And I know about your past, Jim, how things didn't end so well for you. You can't run from that." Jim's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The weight of unspoken fears felt heavy again. He had built so much just to move past the specter of his former life, and now here it was, resurrected, bold and ugly. But before Jim could respond, Rebecca spoke up. "You think you can intimidate us? You're mistaken if you think we're afraid of you, Mark." Her voice dripped with defiance, drawing Jim closer to her side as though they were two pillars against the looming storm. Mark's expression shifted, annoyance pooling in his eyes. "Step carefully, Rebecca. The last thing you want is to embroil yourself in Jim's complications. He's not as stable as you think." At those words, Jim felt the ground shift beneath him. Stability? Hadn't he been the one working hard to reclaim everything he believed he had lost? He caught Rebecca's eye, searching for a flicker of hope and reassurance. "Let me be clear, Mark," Jim said, his voice firmer than ever. "You're not going to control this narrative anymore. I decide how my life goes from here. So, if you've got something to say, say it." The moment felt charged, like a live wire humming with energy. Mark glanced at his companions, an awkward tension settling between them. Jim refused to break eye contact, and Rebecca stood resolute beside him, her presence a grounding force. But Mark wasn't finished. "All right," he said, his tone shifting to something darker. "You want this to be a confrontation? Then let us make it one." Before Jim could ask what he meant, Mark twisted around and locked eyes with one of his companions, nodding subtly. Instantly, both men began moving closer, forcing Jim to brace himself for whatever fallout was to come. Nothing could prepare him for the words Mark threw next, loaded with a threat that made every hair on Jim's neck stand on end. "I'm not done with you yet, Jim. Not by a long shot." As panic surged in Jim's chest, he glanced at Rebecca, her expression fierce but tinged with worry. The tension in the park thickened, rippling out and fading into the laughter of the other families, oblivious to the storm brewing. Suddenly, Jim's mind raced with all the possibilities that lay ahead. This was a defining moment, shaped by the past but fashioned by courage and love. As Mark stepped closer, Jim could feel the weight of quite a reckoning pressing down upon them. With every ounce of strength he had gathered, he prepared himself, knowing this encounter was dwarfed only by the resolve in Rebecca's hand, still tightly clasped in his. Would their bond hold strong against this new threat? But just when Jim thought he might take control of his fate, something unexpected happened in the distance, a flash of light followed by an echoing shout that shattered the tension. They all turned their heads in unison. What was unfolding now? What new obstacle would rise to confront them? The sudden flash of light jerked Jim out of his spiraling thoughts. It felt like a spotlight, piercing through the dark tension that Mark had created. A few yards away, chaos erupted. A small fireworks display had been set off, crackling loudly despite the dimming daylight. Children squealed with delight, laughing and chasing after the bright sparks in the sky. Parents hurried to gather their little ones, many pointing in awe at the colorful bursts above. But Jim couldn't focus on the vibrant display. Mark's men began to shift, uncertain, glancing back at the bright explosions. It was as if the distractions in the air were slowly diffusing the anger simmering at their feet. Jim seized the moment. "Maybe the real secret is with you, Mark," he said, letting a hint of defiance color his words. "This isn't just about us. You're hiding behind intimidations because you're scared." Mark's smirk faltered for a heartbeat, enough for Jim to see a crack in his composure. "You have no idea what you're talking about, Jim. You're just a pawn in a game far larger than you realize." Rebecca's grip tightened on Jim's hand. "Game? Or maybe it's a ploy for control? People like you are predictable, Mark. You think throwing around threats makes you powerful, but it only shows your weakness." Each word flew out of her mouth, fierce and unwavering. Mark's eyes flickered with anger, but another flash in the sky drew his attention. As the colors erupted, the nearby families turned their heads, momentarily distracted. Could it be possible that this spontaneous display of fireworks was turning the tide? Suddenly, from within the crowd, a woman stepped forward, her face illuminated by the flickers of light. Jim squinted, recognizing her as Maria, a colleague from the office. She waved, clearly happy to see Jim, but the smile faltered when she noticed the tension in the air. "What's going on here?" she asked, eyes darting between Jim and Mark. Jim felt a rush of relief. "Just a little conversation about work," he replied, forcing a smile. "You know how it is." He hoped Maria could sense the unease beneath his casual tone. "Oh, I get it," she said, crossing her arms. "I overheard things at the office too. No one believes your threats, Mark." "Not anymore." The words hung thick in the air, igniting a flicker of hope in Jim's heart. The community was stepping up, defying the intimidation that lurked in the shadows. But as Mark surveyed the crowd, annoyance morphed into something sharper. "You think this changes anything?" He leaned closer, his tone cold. "I'm not finished. The real game hasn't even started yet." Just as he spoke, another loud bang echoed, and the last burst of fireworks swirled upward. The families cheered, and several children scampered around, oblivious to the danger that seemed to lurk in the backdrop. Around them, laughter mingled with the crisp night air, serving as a strange comfort amidst the rising storm of confrontation. Enough, Mark, Jim said firmly, trying to draw from the strength emanating around him. You're trying to scare us, but it's not going to work. Just then, something caught Jim's eye, a figure appearing at the edge of the park. It was a man in a sharp suit, his face tense and his posture rigid. Jim squinted. The man's expression seemed familiar, but the distance played tricks. Who is that? Rebecca whispered, her voice almost lost in the cacophony of cheers and the fading fireworks. Someone who shouldn't be here, Jim replied, his heart racing again. The stranger took slow steps forward, his gaze locked on Jim as if weighing the moment meticulously. With everything already at stake, Jim could feel the pulse within him quicken. What was about to unfold? Who was this figure trailing into their lives at this critical juncture? The unforeseen chain of events could unravel everything they had fought to build. As Mark's face twisted in frustration, Jim knew they were standing at the brink of something monumental. Would the arrival of this stranger accelerate the danger? Or could it offer a path to resolve it all? He squeezed Rebecca's hand tighter, ready for whatever came next. The night was charged with uncertainty, and in that moment, he realized they were only beginning to scrape the surface of the real struggle ahead. The air was thick with anticipation as the well-dressed figure approached. His sharp suit seemed out of place amidst the casual attire of families and friends enjoying the fireworks. Jim's heart pounded in his chest. He had seen that same face before, another reminder of the corporate battles raging far beyond their personal struggles. Jim, the man called, his voice deep and authoritative. Jim could feel everyone turning, curiosity etched on their faces, but his focus remained locked on the newcomer. Who are you? Jim managed to ask, his own voice almost lost to the sounds of laughter and celebration surrounding them. Jonathan Price, he said smoothly, stopping just a few feet away. I work directly with Mark. He redirected his gaze to Mark, a hint of disappointment flickering in his eyes. I wasn't expecting to find you making a scene here, my friend. Jim's stomach dropped as the reality set in. Jonathan was a key player, a puppet master pulling strings hidden from view. The uneasy familiarity of this confrontation was layered with the knowledge of the stakes they faced. Mark straightened, his bravado swelling again. You shouldn't be here, Jonathan. This doesn't concern you. Oh, but it does, Jonathan retorted, glancing toward Jim and Rebecca. It's only a matter of time before the consequences of your actions ripple through the entire company. This display, it's quite the spectacle, isn't it? Enough of your games, Rebecca shouted, her voice slicing through the tension. You think you can intimidate us? You think we will stand down because of your shiny suits and corporate threats? The crowd, initially distracted by the fireworks, now seemed to lean in, drawn toward the rising confrontation like moths to a flame. Whispers of concern spread through small gatherings, with families exchanging worried glances. Jonathan's expression tightened as he recognized the resolve in their eyes. You misunderstand, he said softly, almost condescendingly. This isn't just about Mark or a corporate takeover. This is about survival. You either stand with the powerful or get crushed beneath them. It's the way the world works. His words hung in the air like a shadow, and Jim could almost feel the weight of despair creeping in. But he refused to give in. You're wrong, Jim declared, stepping forward. Maybe the world has been like that, but we're standing together now. You think you can manipulate that? You underestimate community, Jonathan. The cheers from the families around them felt invigorating. Jim's voice grew stronger as he spoke of real connection, the way people came together, fighting for one another, standing up against the oppressive weight of fear. Rebecca's hand squeezed his tightly. This isn't just about you, Mark. It's about us as people, our lives, our families. You can't take that away. Not anymore. There was a shifting moment, an invisible line drawn between them and the men who wore arrogance like a second skin. In that instant, it felt like they were part of something larger, a wave of hope washing over the tension that had gripped them moments before. Suddenly, Jonathan glanced to his side, where a few more figures emerged from the crowd, familiar faces from the office, colleagues who Jim had spent countless hours with, and who had felt the weight of Mark's threats the same way he had. Are you with him? Jonathan challenged, disbelief coloring his tone. We're with Jim, one of them called out, taking a brave step forward. Another joined in, their voices rising together. We believe in something better. The gathering felt alive, shifting from mere spectators to active participants in their own freedom. It was a chorus of resilience, echoing through the colorful backdrop of fireworks. But just as victory seemed within reach, the atmosphere shifted again. A low rumble of unease swept through the crowd as Jonathan's eyes darkened. You have no idea what you're provoking here. This won't end well for you. Jim's heart sank. The man's words prickled like a thunderstorm on the horizon, filled with looming menace. What would come next? Would they pay for their defiance, or could they truly turn the tide against their corporate oppressors? As tension surged again, Jim felt another rush of adrenaline course through him. No matter the risks, they were traversing a path none could turn back from. They were awakening to a reality fueled by hope not just for themselves but for everyone who had suffered under fear. He locked eyes with Rebecca, who stood unwavering beside him. Together, they were everything he needed. What came next could alter their destinies forever. The air was thick with unspoken questions, and Jim knew they were now riding the brink of something unimaginable. As Jonathan smirked, a truth shimmered through the chaos. Their fight was only just beginning. The crowd began to shift restlessly, hearts pounding in unison, as Jonathan's smirk spread wider. It felt less like a moment of victory and more like a trap waiting to spring. Jim could sense the fear creeping back, gnawing at the edges of their collective courage. Do you really think this little uprising is going to scare me? Jonathan taunted, crossing his arms confidently. You're cute, really. But all this is just noise. I can make your lives a nightmare in the blink of an eye. You know that, don't you? Laughter erupted from the corner of the gathering, but it was tinged with nerves. Jim's heart raced. He glanced back at the faces staring at him, friends, colleagues, and even strangers who had joined their stand. He saw their hope, but also their uncertainty. We're not afraid, Jonathan. Someone shouted from the back, emboldened by the moment. A brief cheer flared up, but it was swiftly doused by Jonathan's cool glare. You should be, he warned, his voice dropping. You're standing in front of someone who holds the keys to your futures, and he's not alone. I'm here to do a job, and trust me, when I take action, it won't be pretty. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? Jim shot back, rising to the occasion. The idea that you can bulldoze over people and call it a job? No! This is about life, and you need to understand that it means more than manipulating numbers. The words came crashing out, each one fueled by a passion that seemed to surprise even him. It was deafening in its clarity. The crowd hushed, and for a fleeting moment, all that could be heard were the fireworks bursting against the night sky, lighting their faces in flickers of brilliance. Your life is built on our pain, Jonathan, Jim continued, the fire in him raging. And it can't stand. Look around. We're not just employees, we're families. We're dreams and futures, and we're done being silenced. Rebecca's grip tightened on Jim's arm, her eyes sparkling with admiration. Together, we can be stronger than any corporation's threats. Out in the periphery, more office workers stepped forward, emboldened by Jim's stirring words. Slowly, hesitantly, they began to join the ranks of those who stood with him. Each eye focused on Jonathan now, united in a moment that felt electric. But just as they pressed on, a sudden chill swept through the air. Jim felt it like a physical blow, a warning shot sent to silence their growing strength. You may think this is your moment, Jim, Jonathan said, his calm facade cracking ever so slightly. But let me make one thing clear. The moment you stand with defiance, you put every single person here at risk, not just yourself. I'd be careful if I were you. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of unease at Jonathan's threat. Jim felt the fear seep back in like a cold fog, but he couldn't let it settle. He took a deep breath, shaking it off. So what? You're saying we should back down? You want us to stay scared? Jonathan stepped closer, his piercing eyes locking onto Jim. You think courage will protect you? What about the next round of layoffs? Or the contract disputes? Who do you think will face the worst of that? The crowd shifted again, fear and doubt creeping in. Jim could almost hear the whispers of worry. He sensed the weight of their collective anxiety threatening to crush the momentum they had built. This was a defining moment, and he had to seize it. Fear is a weapon, Jim said, his voice rising against the tide, and we won't let it be used against us anymore. We have each other, and that's what makes us strong. If we stand together, we will weather any storm. The murmurs of dissent began to fade, replaced by a swelling pulse of shared strength. Cheers erupted, louder than before, as hope returned to the gathering, igniting a fire that fueled them all. Yet even as the voices rose, Jim noticed Jonathan's smirk had returned, slinking back into place. This man wasn't done. The fight had only grown more complicated, the stakes higher than ever. What would Jonathan do next? As Jim shared a fierce gaze with Rebecca, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They had to be cautious. They were just beginning to climb this formidable mountain, and they had no idea how far the fall could ultimately be. The air crackled with anticipation, and Jim felt like they were standing on the edge of something monumental. The next move would define not just their futures but the futures of everyone entwined in this struggle. What would they all face in the days to come? Would courage pull them through the storm, or would they find themselves lost in Jonathan's darkness? A tense silence fell over the crowd as Jonathan's smirk faded, revealing a flicker of unease. He cleared his throat, steeling himself, but Jim sensed that beneath the facade was a man grappling with the realization that his power was being challenged. "Let us not pretend this is about unity or strength," Jonathan said, attempting to reclaim the moment. "You're frightened, and so you should be. You don't know what I am capable of." Jim could feel the collective pulse of anxiety again, the crowd shifting like leaves in a storm. But they had tasted a flicker of hope, and he wasn't about to let it snuff out. "Fear is only as powerful as we allow it to be," Jim called back, his voice ringing out with a newfound confidence. "Look around. Look at your friends, your neighbors. Do you really want to let fear dictate our future?" More eyes turned to him, and he could see the spark ignite once more. A quiet wave washed over their faces, recognition. Rebecca squeezed his hand. "We've got to show them that we're not just victims, we're fighters." With that, a ripple of cheers broke out. Jim stood taller and felt the warmth of solidarity swell in his chest. His voice rose again, infused with a fervor that galvanized the crowd. "We stand for each other. For those who can't stand for themselves. This is our moment. Together." Yet Jonathan held his ground, his expression shifting to one of cold calculation. "I'll allow you this moment, Jim. But remember, you're not just risking your own neck. You're risking everyone's. There are consequences to this defiance. The higher you climb, the harder the fall." A shadow loomed over Jim's heart at that thought. But not for long. He pushed the fear aside, fueled by the fire in the eyes of those rallying about him. "We'll face those consequences together," he declared. "They may come, but we'll stand united." As the cheers erupted, Jonathan's face darkened. "You will regret this. Mark my words." With that, he pivoted on his heel, marching away into the darkening night, leaving behind a tension that crackled in the air. Jim turned back to the crowd, feeling adrenaline pour through his veins. "They're scared, but we're not. We've already taken our first step, and there's no going back now. Let us plan." Discussions ignited around him, hands reached for one another, and voices were raised in determination. Laughter punctured the anxiety, people sharing ideas and strategies for their next move. It felt like a chain reaction, a living organism awakening from a long slumber. But the relief was bittersweet, for in the back of Jim's mind loomed Jonathan's shadow, echoing threats that sent shivers down his spine. Was this newfound courage merely the calm before a storm? Hours passed, and as the gathering began to disperse, Jim felt a twinge of dread. He was losing grip of the momentum. Could they keep it alive? Was the seed of rebellion he'd planted in their hearts strong enough to weather the storm ahead? He caught Rebecca's eye, and her hopeful smile offered a moment of solace. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together, she assured. But just then, a deafening crash pierced the night air. Jim turned, adrenaline shooting through him again like a lightning bolt. There, silhouetted against the glow of an office window, a figure watched them. Jonathan stood, his phone clutched in his hand, and Jim felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What was Jonathan planning now? With uncertainty creeping back in, the stage was set for a clash that none of them could foresee. The night air crackled with electricity, a mixture of triumph and dread. Jim felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on him as he stood with Rebecca. The crowd had dispersed, laughter fading into the background, but the tension still hung thick like smoke. Together, he repeated softly, the promise echoing in his mind. But as he glanced back at Jonathan's silhouette, his phone glinting ominously in the dark, fear seeped in like the bitter chill of approaching autumn. "Let us walk," Rebecca said, her voice steady. As they moved further into the park, the distant sound of fireworks lingered, a stark contrast to the danger that had just revealed itself. Jim took a deep breath, grounding himself in the warmth of her presence. "Do you think he'll really act on that threat?" Rebecca's question hung in the air. "He has the power to make things difficult," Jim admitted, a knot forming in his stomach. "But we've seen tonight that we have power too. We just need to figure out how to wield it." The moon cast a soft glow, illuminating their path. They found a bench nestled beneath the branches of an ancient oak tree, a temporary refuge from the chaos they just experienced. "Let us talk about next steps," she said, her eyes sparkling with determination. "We can organize everyone at the office. The more of us stand together, the harder it will be for him to retaliate." Jim nodded, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. "Yes. If we create a support network, we can protect each other. If we're all united, he'll have no opportunity to isolate us." Their plans flowed freely, minds buzzing with possibilities. Ideas sparked, igniting a shared vision that felt both revolutionary and terrifying. Each word lay bricks on a foundation of resilience, something they both needed more than ever. As they spoke, Jim's thoughts drifted to Charlie and Lily, who were blissfully unaware of the world's cruelties. "We owe it to the kids to make this right," he murmured. "They deserve a safe future. They deserve to grow up without the shadows of fear lurking over them." Rebecca's gaze softened, and she reached out, squeezing his hand. "We will fight for them. For all of us. And we won't let anyone tear us down." But just as Jim felt certainty blooming, a sharp voice interrupted the moment of reflection. "So, you're not afraid, huh?" Both Jim and Rebecca turned sharply. The voice belonged to Mark, framed by the lamplight at the edge of the park. This time, he wasn't alone. Two of Jonathan's suits flanked him, creating an imposing barrier. "Go away, Mark," Jim replied firmly, standing tall. "Oh, I just wanted to see how strong you really are," Mark sneered. "You think these petty threats will hold us back? You're mistaken." The determination within Jim ignited a fire in his chest. "We're not backing down. You can't intimidate us anymore." With hearts racing, Jim and Rebecca were ready to confront whatever storm was coming. Mark stepped closer, his tone turning cold. "You're playing with fire, Jim. Jonathan isn't just a name, he's a brand. You'll regret this." "He might be a brand, but we're people," Jim shot back. "And people fighting for each other are unstoppable." With an incredulous laugh, Mark threw a glance to his companions. "You really believe that? Look around. You're outnumbered." But something shifted in the crowd behind Jim. The people who had gathered, colleagues and friends, started to step forward from the shadows. They rallied behind Jim and Rebecca, faces filled with determination. "No one stands alone anymore, Mark," came a voice from the back, steady and strong. As people joined Jim and Rebecca, their collective strength pulsed through the air, creating a barrier against the venomous words Mark was hurling. Jim felt a wave of gratitude roll through him as he noted familiar faces among the crowd, his colleagues standing side by side, resolute against the looming threat. "Together," he whispered, and Rebecca nodded, her eyes shining with fierce pride. Mark's expression faltered, annoyance flashing in his eyes. The tides were turning. Confidence surged in Jim's veins as he shouted, "You may come with threats, but we hold the real power here. It's the power of unity, of love. Your manipulation won't work," Rebecca added passionately. The crowd echoed her sentiment, their voices intermingling, creating a resounding chorus of defiance. "You think this is simply going to fade away?" Mark's face twisted with contempt. "Don't say I didn't warn you." With that, he retreated, his suits trailing behind him, leaving behind a palpable sense of triumph mixed with uncertainty. Jim turned to the crowd, heart swelled with hope and determination. "This is just the beginning. We have each other, and we'll stand through whatever storm that comes." Cheers erupted once more, and in that moment, hope twinkled in the darkness. Jim leaned into Rebecca, their fingers entwined, fortified by their resolve, and watched as the faces of their families, friends, and colleagues glowed with renewed strength. As laughter and excitement enveloped the park, igniting young hearts with dreams unfettered, Jim realized they had shifted the landscape. The night illuminated possibility and power. Whatever Jonathan planned, whatever fears existed, they were ready to face it together, united. That was the true strength of love, a force unstoppable. And as the stars began to twinkle against the expanse of sky, Jim knew one thing above all: they were ready to carve their own future, hand in hand, step by step, even when the shadows of doubt crept in. The moment had come. It was time to take back their lives. This was just the beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Let us make sure our message is heard. Comment below how this ending made you feel. I want to know your thoughts. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting our journey. Join us